Good. Let's start from the very beginning. The outcome of the Presidential Election Petitions Tribunal, PEPT, as it is called. The judgment is interesting, and it's divided quite a few Nigerians. So help us understand, because I noticed you were there at the Petition Tribunal. What's your opinion, what's your thought about the outcome of that presentation? 13 hours plus long, where quite a few people were dozing off and nodding off. I don't know whether they did snore, but I was wondering, what's your thought? You stayed awake throughout.
Oh, yes, I did. Nobody, I don't think I heard any snoring, so that wasn't a part of the whole proceedings. But there were quite a lot of people who did dozed off. It was quite tiring, you know, just sitting down and just listening. I was there to actually listen, and I paid rapt attention to the whole proceedings. And I'll tell you, overall, just listening to the judgment being read out, and it was disappointing, not even about the outcome, but one, in the way that it was being read, two, in the kind of mannerism, in the intonation, in the kind of words that were being read at. And I'll tell you that was my first time of being at a sitting where judgment was being read out in such a manner. And I was expecting, you know, those play of words. I've read certain judgments, like, you know, reading the one of like Lord Denning and all of that and what they've said about words. So that in its own way, just listening to it wasn't as interesting and one would have wanted it to be. But that's by the way. On the whole issue was the fact that the judges, in my own opinion, and I'm a witness because I was directly there on that day, is that the justices sounded more like counsels to the respondents than they did like justices. And I know a lot of people have been saying things like, oh, do you think they will charge you contempt of court and all of that? We have opinions. I must hear our opinions. When it came to issue of the judgment, when it's related to the petitioners, you could almost feel the anger. The body language was like angry, the intonation, the words that were being used. Do you think we're going to go to the market and go and get evidence? Things like, oh, you think to come to court and prove that there's an election malpractice or rigging. You think it's like drinking. Is it coffee by an Englishman? They said, you know, all sorts of the way it was being done, almost as if the court was angry that there were actually people who had come to question the election that took place. And in terms of the conversation being had, in terms of the judgment, where you saw, it's almost as if INEC did a sterling job, that there was nothing that INEC had done wrong in all the things that it did. But one other thing that I found most peculiar was when it came to the issue of constitutional interpretation, where when it came to the issue of the forfeiture, the judgment was just read. You know, it was just clipply, as if there was nothing on it, and they just passed over it. But when it came to the 25% of FCT, that's when they would tell us that, look, the Constitution is a living document. You don't just literally, you know, put out the meaning. You don't use literal interpretation to just give an interpretation of it and all of that. And I'm wondering, when it came to the forfeiture, why was that such effort was not also put in place to say, this is not just about now, this is not just about a document, this is about the generation that we have right now and the generation that are yet to be unborn, that it's actually a living document. So that kind of, you know, it's almost like there's a difference when it came to issue that needed to be responded to. And for me, I just felt there should be, people should see that unbiased stance from the justices. Also, to add the fact that there was live coverage of the reading out the judgment. They of course didn't want their faces to be seen. They had warned the media about that the faces shouldn't be shown, only when they were coming in. And then I wonder, why was there no live coverage when it came to the time where there was going to be the trial itself, where evidence would be brought in, so that Nigerians, people, the world will be able to see what really transpired in the court, as against just seeing the judgment that was read out that day.
All right, then. Thank you so much for setting the tone of the conversation. And I appreciate the fact that you were live in court. So you were able to see things that I guess the rest of the country wasn't able to. But when we talk about the court noting procedural blunders by the petitioners' legal teams, including failure to file witness statements on oath as required, the court also highlighted paragraphs of the petitions that they deemed vague, imprecise, and generic. The court also emphasized the lack of credible evidence presented by the petitioners. Now, are we seeing how these procedural errors impacted the outcome of the case? Some are saying that the justices did a thorough job, to the extent that even some of the senior lawyers representing the opposition parties were chided for their inadequacies to look into their research to build their clients' cases. Are we looking at maybe a situation where the opposition's petition was watery from the beginning? And especially when we look at that in the backdrop of them going to the Supreme Court, they are not allowed to add any more information, any more witnesses. They are taking that same case to the Supreme Court. Would you say that maybe it was a case of the petition being watery from the beginning?
Well, the thing is that for you and I now, because we're not allowed the live proceedings, I wasn't in court all throughout the trial. So I came in, I wasn't in the country, so I was able to attend the one of the judgment. So first of all, that's why they say when you're talking about justice, it must not only be done, but it must also be seen to be done. And one of the things that all of this conversation would have cleared would have been when citizens were making demands that there should be live transmission from the courts during the tribunal sittings. If that had been out, every one of us would have been able to see this watery evidence that were put in, or watery case, or whatever the name that it's called, that was put forth. But first of all, that wasn't allowed to happen. And then it is a judgment where it is justices now saying this is what they have arrived at that was allowed to happen. Apart from that is also the fact that there is where they said the way and manner in which INEC had been served in terms of getting the evidence, the materials they were supposed to, counsels to the petitioners were supposed to have access to, that they didn't get it. One of the things that we also have to look at is that the court gives instruction, the court gives its orders to INEC, and then INEC doesn't fulfill it. And at the end of the day, we've seen the court just not doing anything about it and just moving it. And this is not something that is just peculiar to the issue of whether it's INEC being asked to allow petitioners' counsels to have access to certain materials. And I could say also where amongst the justices, when they were reading out that judgment, where they said that, I think it was Justice Haruna Samani who had read out on the fact that any credible candidate should not rely on INEC for their results and things like that. We've seen time again and again where courts in Nigeria will give order, either the executive or institutions will not obey these orders, and it's almost as if it's business as usual, and they just continue what they're doing without really looking at it at the fact that this is an affront on them. It's one thing for us to talk about technicalities and all of that, but it's another thing for us to say there were people, the people who were on the petitioners' council, there were a lot of sons there. There are people who had, this is not their first time of doing a trial, election petition. And for say that all of them, every one of them, that they didn't file these things the way they're supposed to be filed. I'm not a lawyer. Probably the lawyers will be the ones to answer that. But what was most instructive was the fact that the whole justice seems to be on the side of the respondents more than they were just being neutral. And for me, just being, even in the court, the body language, the words, it's almost as if they came alive whenever it was issue of the petitioners that were being discussed. That's not the way it's supposed to be. And I think it was Lord Denning that said that the law is supposed to be there to protect the weak and not to protect the strong. And we must begin to, and for me, that's why over the years, and this is not my first time, time. And it's not because of the result of what has happened. But the fact is that we need to begin to look at the independence of the judiciary and let us know, do we have, the way we have state capture, do we have also a judicial capture? Do we have, how do we, the things that from all of this that we all need to be asking ourselves is that, how do judges get into office? What is the process that bring them in? Is it a transparent process? Is it a process where it's plagued with nepotism and all of that? And at the end of the day, how does it constantly affect the judgment that come out of the courts over time? And we've seen a situation in Nigeria whereby people go on judicial rulings shopping. So somebody will leave Imo State and go to Jigawa State because they want to be able to have judgment in a certain way. Someone will leave Kano State and go to Edo State because they want it in a certain way. What are the things that are leading to all of this? You find a court of appeal in one state, on the same matter we give a ruling, another court of appeal in another place, on the same matter we give a ruling. And so that confidence that Nigerians have in the judiciary, even before the presidential election tribunal started, a lot of people were not interested. A lot of people say, oh, there's nothing that is going to come out of it. We know how this thing. And I remember constantly saying that, look, it's not our business to trust the judiciary. Our business is to overwhelm the judiciary with evidence. And so these are issues that we must ensure that as a nation, justice must be seen. And even in the case of INEC, it's about the processes, it's about the procedure, it's about the things that need to be done. And if these things are not done, we will continue to have a country where people will not have confidence in the government.
Absolutely. In one sentence then, do you think that the evidence was overwhelming in terms of the documentary, the documents, the paper that were presented, that were collated by Labour Party? Do you think it was overwhelmingly clear that the party won? In just 1 or 2 seconds.
I think it was overwhelmingly clear that the party won. Indeed, yes, I believe that. And there were a lot of things that were put before them. What they decide to use, I don't have control over that. Nobody has control over that. They are the ones who have control over what they're going to admit, they are going to allow to be admissible in the court as evidence, and what is not going to be allowed to be admissible in the court as evidence. And that's where transparency comes to play. That's where when people were asking for that live transmission, there's nothing wrong in having put out that live transmission so that every one of us would have sat here to be able to say, oh, even before the judgment to say, oh, maybe they didn't put out enough evidence, or no, they had enough evidence and all of that. And also, like, just to add to it again, I'm talking about transparency now, is the fact that all eyes on the judiciary became something that it became almost as if I don't know, almost a crime. What is wrong with people saying we want to put the judiciary on the spotlight, we want to check the judiciary? And I think this was an opportunity for the Nigerian judiciary to actually welcome the scrutiny that is coming from citizens, because for the first time, citizens now seem to be interested in the things that are happening in it, and it was really important for that. But unfortunately, you saw a situation whereby the justices, there was anger, and I think the female amongst them, I'm sorry, I don't have her name, where she was saying that, oh, people think they can stay on social media and intimidate them. Nobody is intimidating you. What is being done is that people are saying, let's put an eye, let's scrutinize, let's see what. That's what being an active citizen is all about. That's what occupying your office of the citizen is all about. To put an eye on the different aspects of governance that is happening and follow it through. And at the end of the day, for me, on that day, was also the fact that in that room, getting to the court, everywhere was cordoned off. Armed security agents were all over the place, cordoned off the place. And then when you got inside the courtroom also, there were so many from the executive, even though to me, this government is an illegitimate government. It didn't win the election, and that's my own personal opinion as Aisha Yesufu. And you had the NSA, the chief of staff, the vice president, of course, who should be there because it's also one of the respondents, and all manner of people being there. The National national security advisor was in the courtroom. And yet the justices didn't feel intimidated by all of this thing. It's just citizens who are on social media saying, all eyes on the judiciary, don't drop the ball, keep focusing on them, that became the ones that were intimidating. That I found was a bit baffling, honestly.
Right, affirming President Bola Tinubu's election as president of Nigeria. In your opinion, what are the key takeaways from this judgment, or dare I say the significance of such a unanimous verdict in such a high-profile case in terms of its broader implications for Nigeria's legal and electoral system, seeing as most of all our electoral petitions end up in court? No matter what happens, it ends up in court. Are you concerned that this judgment will affect voter turnout in the next 4 years? And as a civil rights activist yourself, between now and the next presidential elections, what should we start to do on ground to make sure that come the next round of elections, we are prepared and even the body language signals a readiness for the electoral body and INEC as a whole?
It's very concerning what has happened, and before I answer your question is to say that there's a reason before when it comes to gubernatorial election and some other election, they ended at the Court of Appeal. They didn't go to the Supreme Court, but after a while there was a reason why. Even though sometimes you have unanimous decision, there was a reason why it was not decided that it can't end there, that they will have to take them also to the Supreme Court. The most worrying aspect of all of this is the fact that we also saw an election where INEC had come out to say they had their own guideline, and they came out to say this was what they were going to do. They were going to transmit a result electronically to the IRF. Even when in November 2022, there were a group of people that had come out to say that, look, INEC was not going to do that transmission. There was something fishy that was going on, which is what later on played out. INEC will come out to vehemently deny that any of that they were going to use all of this thing. And at the end of the day, on election day, at the same day, there were 3 elections that took place, that of presidential, the senatorial, and also the House of Rep. 2 of them had no issues. They were uploaded. They had no glitches. Everything went on. But when it came to that of the presidential election, there were glitches, and these things didn't go on. So which sort of like pointed out more to sabotage. And then you have before the 2023 election, this whole system had been tested, I think Edo and some other states. And even when you had the gubernatorial election, there were no issues. The issues was mainly when it came to the presidential election. Free, fair, and credible election must be seen to be free, fair, and credible election. And where you do not have free, fair, and credible election, many people would not want to vote. And that's the biggest concern that we have right now. The reason why people decided to be invested and interested. There are people who were in their 70s, in their 60s, who had never voted before in Nigeria. They voted this election because they finally felt, okay, one, the words from the assurances that came from INEC that they were going to do this electronic transmission, because many people do know that it is normally when they do that collation, when manual papers are traveling from one place to the other, that a lot of changes happen. And so people had confidence when INEC gave their word. And then the new Electoral Act also made people to be more confident in election and find that, okay, finally their vote is going to count, their vote is going to matter. But here we saw the brazenness that happened, the impunity, the way and manner in which the rigging was done in such a way that numbers were changed, figures were changed. You see, let me give a hypothetical example. You see something like 212, and then you turn the 2 and 1 and make it a big fat 0, and then you now turn it to 2, and then they cancel, they use TPEX correcting fluid to correct and write on it, and then change another person's numbers for it to, and these things were uploaded, blank sheets were uploaded, and at the end of the day, there is not a single thing in that judgment that talked about INEC, in a way and manner that INEC will not continue the institutional rascality that it displayed in the last election with such impunity. And so now what has happened is that with the judgment that we have, INEC has been given an enabling environment for them to do whatever they want to do and then just get away with it. And then you begin to ask, why then did people waste their money? Because this is also a civilian and political coup. And I've said it before, and I'm going to repeat it here again. The way we treat military coup is the same way we treat civilian and political coup. Because when you take away the mandate of the people, when you steal the mandate of the people, that in its own way is a coup also. Look, one thing that we all must understand is that the outcome of the election does not matter. If there was free, fair, credible election, if there was that transmission of results the way INEC was said they were going to do it, and the results all came out, and everybody saw it was transparent, and the results at the end of the day is still what it is today, everybody would have moved on, because it would have meant that there were more Nigerians who wanted the government, the then government, to continue. But that isn't the case, and that is where we must be focused on. And please, 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 Nigerians must stop this thing that we do every time to sweep things under the carpet and say, oh, it has happened, let's move on. There will be a murder somewhere, somebody will come and tell you, but the person has died, now why are you following the case? And that's why these things keep repeating themselves, because we keep giving an enabling environment for all of these things to happen. Systems must work the way they're supposed to be. Processes must be followed. There must be accountability. And where anything is not done, people must be punished for not doing the right things.